And we are back with more thoughts and players. And we are moving briskly onto our favorite segment. Your favorite segment, was it worth it? And Cory had mentioned it briefly earlier. And now is a segment of which we get to discuss this game. We're going to discuss The Falconeer, which was released last year around October, November, I believe. It was one of the games being touted as an Xbox exclusive because it was only on the Xbox. It's an indie game, but it did receive some press because of it, and it's very interesting. So we're going to talk about The Falconeer. Now we have our 5 categories: visuals, sound and music, story, technical aspects, and then of course the gameplay. So guys, let's kind of go in that order for a bit. So we've all had a chance to play this,
Yeah.
which hasn't happened since Streets of Rage 4. So very momentous occasion. But we've all played this game. We're going to talk about the visuals. Now, David,
Yeah.
give me your impressions of the visuals of this game.
Visually, I thought it was good graphics. Everything was easily. What is the word I'm looking for? I mean, you could easily tell what everything was, and the water looked good. The ships looked good. You could see the enemies very easy in the air, even if there were like a bunch of clouds. There was like a target you could use. Graphically, I think it looks it looks great. It,
Nice.
I liked it.
Nice. Cory, what were your impressions of the visuals?
I think it's very mobile-ish. I did not enjoy the graphics as much as David. I thought a lot of things had a very lack of detail. The water looked fine, the sky looked fine, the character models I thought looked terrible. I do want to give a little bit of props though to like world design. We had been talking about this earlier, but they really did make sort of an interesting world because it's really just an ocean-based world with these small islands that populate it. And you see some scenes that you would never be able to see in real life. Like you see these two waterfalls converging, you see these giant monsters being hung up by hooks. The towns themselves are slightly interesting, but I'm not a fan of it. Everything has kind of a blue like hue over the entirety of the game, and it just wasn't enough variety for me. And like I said, the stuff that was there just looked okay. Nothing to write home about.
Mm, gotcha. Visuals for me, I loved them. I dug them. Art style was super cool. There's like a kind of like a permanent dramatic element to the lighting that they use in the game, especially when you get into those thunderstorms and those happen and you have the lightning strikes, charging up your weapon or your bird or anything like that. A lot of interesting different areas. There wasn't a major change in like any kind of biosphere because again everything is like in an ocean, but some cities did look more different than others. There's a city that was closer to like the cold, so it had the snow mountain things. Some places that are warmer, so it has a bit of more of an arid feel. But yeah, I really enjoyed the visuals. You had mentioned like a lack of detail. I think that was deliberate with the artwork. So I mean, in that regard, I dug it. I liked it a lot. Let's move on to item number 2, which is sound, music, voice acting, audio, all that stuff. Um, David, let's go back to you. What were your impressions of the sound, the audio, the music, all that stuff?
Okay, so sound it was good. It was well done. The music I honestly didn't notice. So if there was any, it fit the situations well, And voice acting, I think it was minimal. I don't think it was that good. Especially there was a button that if you hit it, it just do a repeat of the voice cue over and over, and I have a habit of hitting that button, so I keep doing it, and it was really annoying. And it wasn't even the line wasn't even great. So sound good, voice acting meh, music it fits the mood if it was there because I don't remember.
Nice, nice. Cory, what were your impressions?
Forgettable. 100%. I don't remember any of the sounds. I don't remember any of the music. I do remember the voice acting because I thought the voice acting was terrible. The characters sounded extremely corny. Maybe the accents fit well, but I don't know. I don't think the delivery was well done. There was one character I thought was decent, but for the most part, I thought it was a poor job. Overall with sound. I'm not, well, okay, I'll say this. I don't think maybe the music wasn't bad or the sound effects. Like I said, I just don't remember them. So I don't want to give it a high grade or a low grade, but voice acting, a low grade.
Right. Yeah, I would say for sound and music, they were there. They were serviceable. They did what they had to do. The voice acting was a bit odd, peculiar. For me, I liked it. Not that it was good. It was just interesting or peculiar and weird a little bit. I think it kind of fit this weird, interesting, stark, desperate fantasy world that's kind of being built in the game. So it felt like it belonged, as well as like the music. When you're encountering the other Falconeers, the music intensifies and it hits those notes where it's supposed to. But I mean, besides that, it's not anything to really rave about. They were there. They were, I would say, serviceable in all aspects, really, for me. But not much more. So let's move to story. And Cory, you want to take this one? So what were your impressions of the story of the game?
All right, I'll be honest. When I was doing my quick fire, I told you I went from Falconeer very quickly to Vanquish. So I did not get that far into the story before I kind of gave up on the game. But what was there was at least intriguing. It looked like very much a story of like this power struggle between I guess maybe countries or cities, whatever those kind of colonies are. But it had like a nice little push and pull, get on this person's good side. But when you do that, it gets on this person's bad side. Had I played it longer, I think that might have been the high point for me, but I really can't comment too much on it.
Okay. David, what about you?
I think if they have a good baseline for a good story, as Cory, I didn't play it a lot as well. I played like an hour and a half, 2 hours long, and just flying around and fighting the bad guys and doing tasks for some colony people. I think it's a great concept, but at one point the story was so boring I quit. So I think they could have done better with what they started with, because I did like the concept of what the game was before I played it.
So I will say that if we were going to combine kind of like story and lore, I think this game is one of the more interesting takes on story and lore. So you have these different cities that are kind of overseen by different houses. So if you think of, I'm going to make like a Morrowind reference, but if you think about some of the different houses, like a house of Redoran and a house of Hlaalu that were within Morrowind, right? You have these different houses that are usually set up by certain families, certain executives, administrators, and they have different things they do. And so you have to deal with all these different houses struggling to not only dominate. In the case of the first city, it is trying to survive, actually. And so you have these different houses combating. There's politics and different things that play out with it, and it was really, really interesting. So I give them kudos for that, because I think if they possibly come up with a second one and they can dive a bit deeper into the story, I'll kind of agree that maybe the pacing could be better, right? We kind of talked before about how the Medium had an issue with pacing. And I think this also has the issue as well. The pacing in the beginning of the story is a little bit slow, but when you get there, it gets really, really interesting. So story, I have to give them a thumbs up on that. But let's move on to the technical aspect of the game. I'll go really quick because I didn't experience any technical issues. I played it on the Series X. That's what I played it on. So no technical issues on my end. Cory, did you experience any technical issues on your end?
Nope, everything ran pretty well. Same thing, Series X.
Okay. David, how about you?
Technically, everything went well, but the controls, I don't play on controller. I play mouse and keyboard. The options they had were not very good. I had a lot of trouble trying to figure out the aiming and the controls. Eventually, I found a set that worked well enough, but it was not favorable. But that was it. Everything else, it ran smooth. I had no issues besides that.
Okay. So then that leads us to the last category, usually the most conversation heavy one, which is the gameplay. It's a game, you got to play it. And then, like our previous one, this one actually has gameplay in it. So let's see here. Well, since you kind of, David, I want to continue with you because you were
Okay.
talking about you're using the keyboard and mouse combo.
Yep.
And so I think that's different from how me and Cory played it. So the gameplay, how was the gameplay for you in it?
It wasn't that great. Just trying to shoot stuff in the air while you're moving with controls that aren't great made it very hard to play the game. But I didn't let that get in the way of trying to grade this game. But eventually, you know, I beat like the first level, whatever, and then the next level, you're like following this ship to like help bring it to another area. It was so boring. You just literally flew around for 15 minutes just to be bombarded by a bunch of enemies to die. And that's where I quit. Like, there's no way I'm gonna replay another 15 minutes of flying around just to maybe beat these guys again. And then if I died and had to do it again, like that was where the pacing was really bad for me, and where I think they could change something, like throw an enemy here, throw an enemy there, you know, 2 enemies now. But yeah, the gameplay it did not sit well.
Cory, how about you? How was the gameplay for you?
Yeah, I think when you're looking at like an aerial combat game, which this game is, you're looking for like really a dynamic kind of gameplay, and I really didn't get that at all. It really felt simplified, with only a couple really basic moves, and the rest is kind of just circling around your enemy and hoping you're a little faster so you can get behind him before he gets behind you. Because like David said, they come quick and they knock you out, and then you got to restart missions. And a few of those missions were escort this ship for 5 to 10 minutes, get a little bit of lore, which is interesting the first time, not the second. So while you're escorting, you just feel like, yes, the gameplay is very boring. And when you get into a fight, it picks up, but like I said, there wasn't enough there to make me feel like I was in complete control of like, hey, if I play well enough, I can easily I can win this mission. It just felt a little random on my part, but it wasn't the worst combat. You know, there's some things you can do in the game with upgrades to the speed of your Falcon and different weapon types, which are okay. It did help the game, but moment-to-moment gameplay, I did not enjoy. I found it boring as well.
Nice. So,
well, yeah, I guess.
Nice. I mean, nice. That was it. You know, I guess. Let's see. Gameplay. Yeah, I would probably echo most of what you guys said. The pacing for the gameplay is probably the worst part of the game for me. It just, again, you have these escort missions that take a long time, and I don't understand why they're taking so long. And it seems like if you want to have these more kind of grandiose, larger missions, you have to have more stages to keep the player's interest, right? The flying around was okay, but kind of weird. My bird got tired all the bleeping time, and it's a bird. I don't know how that happens.
Right.
I was having an issue with, I don't know if it's anatomically correct for a bird to hover. I don't know if birds can hover, but I feel like I desperately needed my bird to hover at some instances, and you can't do that. There was one instance where if you push a button to dive to retrieve a mine or something, if you're flying low enough, your bird just dives. And it's like, well, what the hell just happened? Right. So there were some instances of that where it's like, okay, that's weird. As far as being able to, all the upgrades you can apply to your bird, there's different levels, different tiers. So a tier 1 or tier 2 juice makes your bird faster or something like that. One thing I didn't like is that once you complete the campaign for a certain city or whatever, you go to another one. And the Falconeer you are in that one it may look the same, but it's not the same Falconeer. So you don't get to travel this whole intricate journey with the person. It's more so a journey with the politics and the lore of the world, which is something that I didn't really like too much because I'm upgrading my bird or I'm upgrading my guy's gun. So I like to be able to hold on to those things. And I don't get to hold on to them when I go to the next city. So that was something else that I didn't really like. As far as the combat and all that stuff, you're right. You're flying in circles until you can clip someone down. I feel like that's most aerial combat. Is usually kind of that, unless you're playing something like a super old Panzer Dragoon or something. Usually it's just circle around, shoot down, and so it does that. I thought that the mechanic of recharging your gun or your weapon in thunderstorms is cool. I thought being able to, ride whirlpools or wind streams and stuff was pretty cool. Those are nice little cool elements they added in. But yeah, when you're flying a ship for 5 minutes and then you get into a situation and then you got to fly someplace else that's 5 minutes, it starts to drag.
Yeah.
That's definitely, to me, the worst part of the game. Which brings us to the end of our Was It Worth It? We've talked about this. And of course, was it worth it? Is it worth it? Now, this game usually retails at its release, it retailed for $29.99. It usually retails a little bit between $20 and $30 now, and it is on Xbox Game Pass currently. And I believe, like I said, I think it is only an Xbox exclusive at the moment. So guys, you've had a chance to play this game. Let's start with you, David. This game, is it worth it?
Overall, not worth it, but if this is your niche kind of game, aerial fighter, and you like, ship lore, stuff like that, you might want to try it, but I wouldn't recommend it, honestly. And I know we all said it goes 0 to 100 in a bad way, and I just want to mention, I mentioned that in Phasmophobia, it goes from 0 to 100, and that didn't lose my interest for the game. So I think they just did the 0 to 100 very poorly. But yeah, I don't think it's worth it.
Cory, what about you?
Yeah, last level, really ripped the medium. Very disappointed by that game. Picking this game up and playing within the first hour, I knew it wasn't going to be worth it for myself. It's a very quirky game. I wouldn't say it's my type of game that I normally play. So yes, it's not worth it for me. But if you do like this kind of politics and you do enjoy air combat, you might get some enjoyment out of this game. It's definitely not my type of game. So if you tend to lean on the type of games that I play, I would say avoid it. But if you're a different type of gamer, give it a look, give the trailers a look, and see what it's like for you.
I so want this game to be worth it. I so want it to be. Because it's an earnest attempt by a single developer to create a very interesting game with really interesting politics and lore. Why can't this game be $10 cheaper? Why can't it?
It will be eventually.
Because at its current thing right now of it retailing for $30, we're taking that to account, it's not worth it. If this thing was 20, I'd probably lean more towards yeah. Because I think the time, it's usually about a 10 to 12 hour time investment in the campaign. There's a lot of things there that give it value, but not $30 worth of value to me when you can go get other games. Some of them even AAA now that are discounted that you could spend $30 on and get, a much more refined experience. It's on Xbox Game Pass. Did you give it a try there? You think people should maybe give it a try there? I would recommend, if I can recommend you give a spin to the medium, I can definitely recommend you give this a spin. just because this game is going to probably be have much more of a mainstream appeal than something like the medium would, at least to me. I think aerial combat, creatures, interesting world stuff, maybe a little bit more reach in psychological horror, but I could be wrong. But yeah, if you're Game Pass in it, I say definitely give it a try. You're going to have to push through that first hour, like Cory said, because the pacing's a little off. But yeah.